Margaret Chen stood frozen in her kitchen, phone trembling in her hand. The text from her neighbor Linda had just shattered her world into a million pieces. "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I think you should know what's happening in your own home." Margaret was 42, elegant and soft-spoken, with warm brown eyes that had always seen the best in people. She worked as a librarian downtown, spending her days surrounded by stories. She never imagined her own life would become one of betrayal. Her husband Derek was supposed to be at work. He managed a construction company and often came home late, covered in dust and exhaustion. Or so she thought. Margaret moved quietly through her house. Her heart pounded, but her steps were steady. She had always been the calm one, the rational one. Even now, with suspicion flooding her mind, she moved with purpose. The storage room was at the back of their property, converted from an old garage. Derek had installed new locks last month, saying he needed secure space for expensive equipment. Margaret had believed him. She always believed him. As she approached, she heard muffled voices through the door, laughter, her husband's deep rumble, and then Rachel Morrison's distinctive giggle. Rachel lived 3 doors down. She was 35, always perfectly put together, with salon fresh hair and designer workout clothes. She volunteered at the same community center as Margaret. They had served Thanksgiving meals together just last month. Margaret's hand moved almost by itself. She pulled the padlock from her pocket, the one she'd purchased that morning after Linda's text. With steady fingers, she locked them inside. She didn't bang on the door, didn't scream or cry. Instead, she walked to the outdoor electrical panel and flipped the breaker for the storage room. The autumn air was cool against her face as she pulled out her phone. "Rachel's husband, please," she said calmly when someone answered at the Morrison household. "Tell him there's something at my house he needs to see." The storage room. Right away. Then she called Derek's supervisor at the construction site. "Hi Tom, this is Margaret. I need you to come by the house. There's been an incident. It's urgent." She sat on her back porch steps and waited. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees Derek had planted when they first bought this house 15 years ago. She remembered that day, how happy they'd been, how full of dreams. 20 minutes later, James Morrison pulled into her driveway, confusion written across his face. He was a kind man, an accountant who coached Little League on weekends. "Margaret, what's going on?" She stood up slowly, brushing off her slacks. "I'm sorry, James. I'm so very sorry, but you need to know the truth." His face went pale as understanding began to dawn. Together they walked to the storage room. Inside, panicked voices called out, Rachel's shrill pleading, Derek's angry demands. "Let us out. Margaret, the power's out. We can't see anything." James's hands clenched into fists, but Margaret touched his arm gently. "Wait," she said softly. "Just wait." Tom arrived next, his work truck rumbling up the driveway. He was Derek's boss, a no-nonsense man who ran his company on integrity. Margaret explained everything quietly, with dignity. Tom's expression darkened when she finally unlocked the door. Derek and Rachel stumbled out, blinking in the sudden light. They froze when they saw the audience waiting for them. The scene that followed was inevitable. James's rage, Rachel's tears, Derek's pathetic excuses. But Margaret stood apart from it all, wrapped in a strange sense of peace. Tom fired Derek on the spot. "I won't have someone who lies to his wife representing my company." In the weeks that followed, Margaret discovered she was stronger than she ever knew. She filed for divorce. She kept the house. Derek had to sell his truck to pay his half of the legal fees. Rachel and James separated too. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip for months, but Margaret held her head high. What surprised her most was the support. Linda next door, who had sent that first text, became a true friend. Other neighbors rallied around her. Even Tom from the construction company checked in regularly. "You handled that with more grace than most people could manage," Linda told her one evening over tea. Margaret smiled softly. "I didn't want to become someone I wasn't. Anger would have poisoned me more than it hurt him. 6 months later, Margaret sat in her garden, now entirely her own. She had planted roses that spring, deep red ones that reminded her of new beginnings. She learned that kindness to yourself sometimes means removing people from your life. That strength isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. Derek moved across town. Margaret heard he struggled to find work after word spread about his character. Rachel lost her marriage and her reputation in their tight-knit community. But Margaret, she flourished. She took up painting classes. She traveled to places she'd always wanted to see. She learned that betrayal, while painful, could also be liberation. 1 year later, she met someone new, a gentle professor who frequented her library. But that's another story. For now, Margaret sat in her garden, at peace with herself, knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to let someone else's choices diminish your light. The storage room stood empty now, a reminder that secrets always find their way into the light eventually, and Margaret, she was finally, truly free.